It's drafts. We've got Jake Morley, Jake Westendorf, and special guest Kent Swanson tonight. Boys and girls, let's hit it. And live, back and better than ever. This is the Gold Zone, a brand new show for draft season hosted by myself. I'm Jacob Westendorf. I'm a familiar face. And by this point, Jake Morley is as well. And Jake, I got to tell you, that's impressive. You spelled your own last name wrong in your Twitter handle. So
look at that.
That is a good start. But
look at that. Nice. Yeah, I certainly did.
And joined with us, we have Kent Swanson of Arrowhead Pride. We're not going to talk too much about what happened on Sunday because I know that is the last thing I would want to do if I were in your shoes. But as I mentioned, guys, this is called the Gold Zone. And of course, why?
I love gold.
That's right. We love gold around here. And Jake and I were talking about this before the show. And I still don't fully understand why Nathaniel Hackett is obsessed with that movie. Of the Austin Powers movies, that is the worst one. And that movie was made when I was in middle school. So like 15 or so years ago. So to still be obsessed with that movie, it's not like a classic, but that's the analysis you're going to get from here is that. So Jake, what are your thoughts on the Austin Powers trilogy real quick? And then we'll move from there.
Yeah, I think the first one's solid with the robot chicks. I wasn't ready for this question, Jacob. I don't think I've seen them since I was in middle school. The last one's not good. The first two are fine. I have no idea why Nathaniel Hackett clung to that one or why that became a thing because Aaron Rodgers is probably the only person that's seen those movies in that locker room because I don't know if you guys know this, pals, but we're old. We're pretty old. We're all in our 30s. Most of these players in the NFL.
I am not 30 yet.
Oh, you're not?
No,
whatever.
sir.
Well, either way, I'm 32, so I would be on the back nine of my career. So I mean, none of these guys even know what that is. So that's hilarious to me that they clung on to that. And we're the best gold zone offense in the NFL this last year.
That they were. And we have, of course, with us is Kent Swanson of Arrowhead Pride. Like I mentioned, you can follow him on Twitter. He's at Kent_Swanson. Coming off I don't know. Would you call it devastating, I guess, since the score was not competitive? I mean, I don't know. How do you describe that? So Kent, just to explain this real quick, like I mentioned, I'm 29. So when the Packers lost Super Bowl 32, I was 6. So I guess I don't quite know how this feels, but was that one of those games you were resigned to the fact it was over at 31-9, or is it we still got Pat?
I mean, we were pretty resigned to the fact pretty quick. It became very obvious that things were kind of catching up to this football team. Attrition on the offensive line and Patrick Mahomes having turf toe. It kind of speaks to how lucky we feel we are here in Kansas City that we thought he could overcome it. But man, they exposed that backup line so quick, and Mahomes couldn't even create the same way that he normally was. I mean, he was pressured at the highest rate in Super Bowl history. That's absurd.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because looking back, it's as Packers fans, because I was the same way, Ken. I was just even in the third quarter, I'm like, okay, when's he gonna get it going? When's the flip gonna switch? Or when's the switch gonna flip? And it just never happened, and it was weird. And it's we should have seen this coming because Tampa Bay did the same thing to Green Bay 2 weeks ago, and Green Bay, had one of the best offensive lines, even minus David Bakhtiari. They still had a really good starting 5 offensive line unit, and Rodgers was under pressure the whole game too. So it's okay, going into the game against the Chiefs, they're essentially playing a center and 4 guards, and we're going to expect them to block up JPP and Shaq Barrett. Looking back on it, I think it kind of unfolded in a way that we're kind of yeah, we kind of thought that might have happened, but there's just been this air of invincibility around Kansas City since Pat's been there, and rightfully so. They don't lose games like that, and he hasn't. And so for that to happen in the Super Bowl it's pretty unfortunate. But that's that's also why Tampa was there. It's because they got hot doing that type of stuff, and it just was like a two worlds colliding and one completely overwhelmed by the other. So sorry, pal. I will say this though, before we get off on this, I had to go to Mobile with 3 Arrowhead Pride giddy Chiefs writers the day after the Packers lost to Tampa Bay. So I feel sorry for you, but not that sorry.
You don't.
I do.
Be honest.
It's understandable. So before we get into the draft stuff, I do have to ask, Kent, why is Aaron Rodgers better than Pat Mahomes?
Man, you're trying to put me out here. I mean, we are. I mean, I guess we are kind of on Green Bay slanted show. No, I mean, dude, Aaron Rodgers. Jay can tell you how much I love Aaron Rodgers and how much I've admired. He's been my favorite quarterback until I got one of my own. So I think there are some similarities to these two, and I genuinely think we're talking about the 2 best quarterbacks in football.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. It's still absurd to me that Josh Allen got more MVP votes than Pat Mahomes did. I would have, when it came to the MVP, there came a point eventually where it was like, okay, this is Aaron Rodgers' award, but I can listen to an argument for Mahomes because the Chiefs, I mean, really, like Jake mentioned, if they play their starters in every game, they're 15-1. They're a juggernaut. They just, unfortunately, you get to the Super Bowl, and when you can't block those guys, that's turned Tom Brady into a mere mortal in past Super Bowls. You've seen that happen too. So I think if memory serves, that's only the second game that Patrick Mahomes has started and finished with all of his guys. So Hill, Kelsey, etc. And the Chiefs have lost. It is a remarkable run that they've been on for the last 2 seasons. And I mean, the good news is, and you know this as well as anyone now, you have a guy like that, you're in the mix every single year. I fully expect Kansas City to open the season as the favorite in the AFC. I got a hard time seeing them not getting, I mean, granted, this is February 10th, but not getting back to the Super Bowl. So let's talk about this. We are going to go from a Packers perspective, but Kent, you can feel free to throw some Kansas City stuff in there as well. When the Super Bowl ends, everybody asks, well, that's the blueprint. Everybody goes, that's the way to win right there. Whatever Tampa just did, or whatever, who the hell won last year? Kansas City, whatever Kansas City did. That's how you win championships. Yeah. There was that. I remember now. That's how you build a championship team, is that way. And that is kind of like measured as the only way to win, or is that the new way to win in today's NFL, blah, blah, blah. So the question I have, Morley, I'll start with you, is how does Green Bay now catch Tampa Bay into becoming not just the team that plays them and is one possession away from going to the Super Bowl versus beating them, getting over the top and getting a chance for that Mahomes-Rodgers Super Bowl that we so desperately crave?
You don't build your team to beat one team. We saw it last year with the Niners. That was the whole thing, was how do you beat the Niners? How do you beat the Niners, Green Bay? And you can't build your team that way. The easiest answer for that is get Bakhtiari healthy. Because if he's healthy in that NFC Championship game, it's probably Packers Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So you can't go out and do that. And I know it's always the flavor of the offseason. It was Kansas City 2 years ago with, everybody, we got to surround Rodgers with weapons. We got to surround him with weapons. And now you got to have linebackers. When last offseason, when it was Kansas City that won, we're talking about the mailman that were playing inside linebacker for Kansas City and how that position doesn't matter. Now Levante David and Devin White go have 2 good games, and now everybody needs these fast, rangy linebackers. When the answer is both, have good players. Just have good players on your team, right? And I think for this Packers team, they need to follow more of the Kansas City model, because that's how this team is geared to win. They have an offensive line. I still think, my hashtag for Kansas City every draft season is, when you have Patrick Mahomes, just score 100. Put him in a position to score as many points as you can. And it's not really any different. It's different in Green Bay. Green Bay has the infrastructure along their offensive line for the 38-year-old quarterback next year. Now, they had the number 1 scoring offense in the league last year. So this is going to sound contradictory, because I was just on a podcast last week talking and telling people to be quiet about the receiver position, but it never hurts to add more guys, to add more firepower when you have one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the game. Give him weapons. And I think that's what Kansas City's done such a good job of with their skill guys. But now Kansas City's going to have to look back and say, okay, but now have we just completely ignored the offensive line position? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I hope they write that this offseason. But to score 100, you got to block guys too. So to catch Tampa Bay, you need to look at your roster and say, what do we do well and how can we maximize what we do well? So it doesn't necessarily mean we need to go copy someone else. It just means this is what we got. This is what we need to do. And honestly, let's hope the ball bounces our way a couple more times next year. That's where they're at. They're close enough that if they get a penalty that isn't called the whole game, just continue to not be called, they're potentially in the Super Bowl. So it's just one of those things that you just have to keep. You got to stay the course, and luck has something to do with it. It's not everything. You got to make your own luck, but sometimes to get to the Super Bowl and win it, like the Chiefs this year, were probably the better team than Tampa Bay, but they got bad luck with injury at the end of the year. And that's part of the game, man. So I would just say stay the course, Green Bay. Continue to do what you do well.
So I knew he was going to say that because I've talked to him enough about this. So I posed the question that way specifically. So on the outside looking in, Kent, Jake says that the team is, that close and they shouldn't build their team to beat Tampa Bay, but just to do the things they do well. So apart from they have Aaron Rodgers, what else does this Packers team, from your estimation, do really well that they could try to add to throughout the course of this offseason?
Well, I think Jake kind of nailed it with the offensive firepower. I think continue to insulate Aaron Rodgers and just continue to give him everything he needs to cook, because if you give him all the ingredients that he needs, I think he's going to keep every game close. I mean, honestly, you guys were a little bit of situational football from winning that game. Mm-hmm. It just came down to a few key situations. I don't think there was a talent issue on either side of the ball. You had the pass rushers. I mean, everyone but Kevin King in the secondary. Don't
say that name.
There are people in Kansas City that want the low-risk flyer that is Kevin King.
Kevin King's name officially is not TJ Watt. That is his official name going forward.
But I think you do just keep adding talent, get a little bit better with your situational football. Obviously, Mike Pettin isn't there anymore. And I think some of that lack of situational football, he shares some blame. I'm sure you guys have probably talked a lot about that. So, there are some positive indicators, I think. I think you've already made some adjustments and some steps towards fixing the things that kept you from getting into that game and probably beating the Chiefs because your front was good enough to whoop that group too.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And it's one of those, I never like to play revisionist history. And I'm sure that game goes different because JPP and Shaq Barrett and Sue and Vita Vea and all them, that group together is better than Green Bay's front. That being said, a front of the Super Smith brothers, even a compromised version of that, Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, I think you're right. That makes Pat maybe not run for his life, but run for some of it.
I think the one thing is I don't know how Mike Pettin. I don't know if Mike Pettin had the mental firepower to do what Todd Bowles did.
Oh, mental firepower.
Honestly, what I was most impressed with was the ability. Nobody in the NFL, not even Belichick, shuts down Ty Hill and Travis Kelce. And Kelce was a bit of a factor, but it was kind of like empty yardage throughout the course of the game, And whenever it's third down and I'm watching Kansas City play, I'm always like, okay, where's 87? Because it's kind of like Rob Gronkowski back in the day for the Patriots, or I guess now in the day for Tampa Bay. But that's interesting. Think about it that way. So let's look at the team's needs going forward. And I wrote a story for Packer Report. Again, everybody talks about blueprints and how the game goes. And unfortunately, with the Super Bowl, there's narratives that come out of it. So the narrative that comes out of this Super Bowl is Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time. He walks on water. He cured cancer and all the other things that come into play with that is Tom Brady. And Patrick Mahomes is a one-hit wonder, and he's probably overrated a little bit. And maybe we crowned him a little too soon. Both of which are ridiculous narratives, but we won't get into that, obviously. My thought is, if you look at Tampa Bay, Tom Brady was comfortable throughout the course of the entire game. He just stood there in the pocket. Only early in the game, Chris Jones and Frank Clark had a sack early in the game. Outside of that, he was comfortable throughout the course of the game. And on the defensive side of the ball, we mentioned Patrick Mahomes was not. So my thought on that was, and it's the way I've always looked at football, and that is build the front and the rest will fall into place. Invest in offensive linemen, invest in pass rushers. And for as many, they do need some little guys too, if you will. They need a receiver or two, maybe a pass catcher like a running back and stuff like that. But build those groups up front. And Jake, you talked about this too. Nobody's talking about the need that the Packers have at the edge position. So tell me a little bit about that with Preston Smith's not going to be around, most likely. Zadarius Smith has regressed from amazing to very good, but that's still a regression. And Rashawn Gary is an ascending player, but he still hasn't arrived yet, so to speak. So they are a regression or an injury away from starting Jonathan Garvin, Randy Ramsey, Tipa Galea. No offense to those guys, but that's not exactly Preston Smith of 2019.
It's not. And you look at the defensive side of the ball, and everyone's going to point to cornerback and say, who's going to play, who's going to play on the opposite side of Jair, who is the best cornerback in football right now? And can you get a guy that's at least competent enough to be okay? Because that's really all you need on the other side. It really is. You got a guy taking away half the field. You should be able to figure out and scheme up a way to cover that other half. But like you said, with Zadarius and even with the way they use Z and Rashawn Gary, they love to kick those guys inside. So they love to play through those edges at a time. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if it's going to be the same way. I don't really know what Joe Barry's going to want to do. But if like you said, if one of those guys get hurt, how confident are you in Jonathan Garvin coming in and playing meaningful snaps for you? So it is a sneaky, top 100 type position. And that's what's nice for this Packers team is besides the cornerback position, that is the easiest one to spotlight and say you probably need a starter there. You probably need somebody to come in and play. The other spots like tackle, line, defensive line, edge, those are all kind of secondary needs to me, saying like, okay, that's a guy you probably want to invest a top 100 pick in if the price is right. But they're all to the point where it's like, hey, at pick 29, if you got an offensive tackle sitting there that you really like, if you got an edge, if you got an interior defensive player, a corner, any of those guys, I think that's a direction the Packers go. They've set themselves up really nicely the way they've constructed this roster, with the way they have a lot of versatility from top to bottom, especially on that offensive line. Even with Bakhtiari being hurt to start next year, you have Billy Turner, who can play guard, who can play tackle, can play left tackle at an above average level. Elton Jenkins, same way. You can play all 5 spots. Those 2 guys basically being able to do that gives them a ton of flexibility for those big guys up front to basically say, hey, this player fell. He's a center. Can we use a center? Sure. Can we use a guard? Sure. Can we use a tackle? Sure. Because we'll figure it out. If he's one of our best 5, we'll plug him in there. And Stenovich has been nothing short of amazing these last 2 years that he's been in Green Bay, and just give him something to work with. And I have all the confidence in the world that if you give him a talented player, you're going to get high level results. So for me, the top 2 positions, I would say corner is their top need. But it's not far behind offensive tackle and edge, not far behind at all.
No. And that's where my thought comes into play as well. As in, if, do you take at pick 29, do you take the 4th or 5th best corner instead of the 2nd, 3rd offensive tackle or edge player? That's kind of my thought on it is always get as many A players as you can. And if you have a player who's ranked in A, take the A player that's not a need instead of taking a B player. So for example, and we'll talk about this in a minute, Jordan Love is an A player to the Packers. Wasn't an A player to me, but he was an A player to the Packers, quite clearly. They preferred that over a B player that they had on their board, like Chase Claypool or Michael Pittman or something like that, that was a perceived need. So that's something I think on that. Kent, what are your thoughts on the Packers' biggest needs going into this draft? I know you mentioned the weaponry around Aaron Rodgers, but maybe apart from that, where are you looking at this team of looking to upgrade on their roster?
I think up front's a really great concept, especially in this draft class. Like if you're looking at this draft class and you're looking and you're assessing some of the Packers needs, I say a wide receiver. I agree. Getting some defensive line help up front, I think is really smart. Offensive line as well, continue to insulate that as well. You're looking at great value up and down this draft board for the Packers. So I think there's ways that they're going to be able, I think we're talking about these 3 positions, edge, offensive line in any capacity and wide receiver. I think you could upgrade all those and still go best player available with something else in the first round, because there is that good of talent up and down this board at all 3 of those spots. So I like kind of where Jake was heading with all that. And I mean, if you're attacking pockets of players in those 3 positions, especially on day 2, I think the Packers are going to be thrilled. I think Packers fans will be thrilled with the talent and the value that they get.
They're gonna take a running back or
So Najee Harris. Well, here's the thing, Jake, and I will say this. Something I think there's not a lot I think you can learn because the Packers are famously one of the most tight-lipped organizations when it comes to who they're drafting. Nobody saw Jordan Love coming. Nobody saw Rashawn Gary coming. To some degree, Jair Alexander was a surprise as well. What I can tell you,
he didn't fit their thresholds. He wasn't even on my radar. I'm like, they're not gonna take him. That guy's awesome. But they're not going to take him. He's
short. Yeah, he's short. And they broke. Well, Gutekunst said that they altered it a little bit, and it must have been because of him, which thank God they did. But the one thing I think I could tell you, as of February 10th, 2021, at 10 minutes to 7 o'clock here in the Midwest, is I think you can narrow down the Packers picks to a couple things. Number one, in the first round, premier positions. So quarterback, pass rusher, pass protector, pass defender, maybe pass catcher. But I think if you go into those slots, that's something I think you can, if you tell me like, hey, Green Bay is going to take a center or a guard or something like that in the first round, I think I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, but I think you can dismiss that. And I think if you want to narrow it down, you can narrow it down to those spots. So quarterback, probably not, but we've been surprised before. Wide receiver, maybe a line of scrimmage defender, or a cornerback or a safety. And every time Gutekunst has taken a player in the first round, Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, Darnell Savage, and Jordan Love, premier positions. The other thing I think I can tell you, Brian Gutekunst subscribes to the Don Brown theory, and that is former Michigan defensive coordinator. Now I think he's at Arizona. Solve your problems with aggression. Brian Gutekunst has traded up in the first round of every draft he's been a part of since becoming the Packers general manager. Famously last year for Jordan Love, the previous year for Darnell Savage, and the year before that, a bit of a caveat. He did trade down before moving back up to take Jair Alexander, but he's traded up in every draft. So if you want to start with a philosophy discussion, that's where I think you can start. Let's jump into the purpose of this show, which is draft season. And we're talking quarterbacks. So it's one of the downsides to this time of year. The season is over, and that sucks because we don't have games to watch on Sunday, but the draft is a lot of fun. And if you're watching the show, I assume that you are into the draft as well. So let's talk about the Packers are probably not picking a quarterback. I think you can safely, I don't want to guarantee anything, but I think you can dismiss that when you have the league MVP and a first round pick on the roster going into next season. That pick 29 is not going to be Trey Lance or Mac Jones or whatever quarterback that is that falls. Sorry, Jake, but Trey Lance is probably going to be a Detroit Lion, or Trey Lance is going to be a Detroit Lion, while Carson Wentz is a Chicago Bear. And North Dakota State fans that are also Packer fans are going to weep while watching some of their former heroes and rooting for them.
Oh, wait, man. I told you I'm not above rooting for those guys to fail if they're in the division.
So let's start here with philosophy, because Jake, you've had some very strong opinions on the selection of Jordan Love. And you were actually on one of my shows after they picked Jordan Love. And everybody now, Rodgers obviously has the season, maybe the best season of his career after they picked Jordan Love. Love sits on the bench. He's never active. And everybody says, oh, there was even a story that came out today is the pick looks worse now than it did then. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy with drafting quarterbacks and specifically with Green Bay taking Jordan Love. And then we could put that to bed.
Well, first of all, let me say, if Jordan Love had anything to do with Aaron Rodgers having the season that he did, I would take a quarterback. I would take a quarterback again at 29 if it ensures that he's going to throw 50 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So let's get that out of the way. So I was a big Jordan Love fan throughout the whole process, and I always kind of mockingly said, there's even receipts out there of me saying like, oh, Jordan Love would be kind of a fun pick
from like September of that year.
And turns out I was right. And it does. Okay, so here's the deal though. I love Jordan Love as a prospect. I've heard good things about Jordan Love coming out of Green Bay. I've heard that they are more excited about him now than they were when they drafted him, which is a good sign. It's also one of those things that we have not seen him even suit up, right? And neither have they. So what else are they going to say? Of course they're going to say that. But, the quarterback position is the most important position in sports. If you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win a Super Bowl. And if you don't have a quarterback that has the potential to bring a team to the Super Bowl, you're really in a world of hurt. And so the fact that You look at Aaron Rodgers in 2019, you look at him in 2018. I hate to tell Packers fans this. He wasn't very good. He was good. He was good, but he wasn't the Super Bowl quarterback good. The type of guy you're going to put it on his shoulders and say, "Hey, go out and win us the game." Because we.
And on that note, Jake, not to cut you off, but there are games that proved that throughout the course of, especially 2019. You look at the NFC title game against San Francisco. That game was going to be won on the shoulders of Aaron Rodgers, and they couldn't do it. And if there was a game where they had to get into a shootout, you had some very legitimate questions as to whether or not they were going to win. And I always go back and point to this. Watch last December, because for everybody that does the revisionist history of whoever could have thought Aaron Rodgers was washed up. Well, December 8th against Washington, he was not good. December 15th against Chicago, very average. December 23rd against Minnesota, very average. Bad against Detroit in the season finale. They're able to come back and win because the Lions are the Lions, and that's just what they do. Good enough against Seattle, probably really good against Seattle. And then put up a bunch of numbers in garbage time against, like, if Aaron Rodgers is Kirk Cousins and that's the Vikings playing in the championship game, we're not looking at his stat line and saying, oh, he was awesome. The team around him just failed him. We're saying, no, he stunk and put up a bunch of points after it was 27-0. So I don't think it was a unfair thought that Rodgers was still a very good to good quarterback, but maybe his elite level of play was done. And now clearly, obviously very wrong.
Well, and it's easier now to go back and admit that now that we are reminded of the player that he once was in the early 2000s, when he was able to kind of recapture that and show us, like, no, this is the Aaron Rodgers. This is the Hall of Fame Aaron Rodgers. What we got the last couple of years was kind of a shell of that for whatever reason. And so I think you look at that and then you look at the injury history. And I honestly think, was it the right time to maybe start looking for a quarterback? Was it maybe a little bit early? Sure. But I'd rather be a little bit early on that position and know what I have in a couple of years. And if I need to kick the can or kick him out and go do it again, that's fine. I think there's too much pressure that's put on quarterbacks in finding one. And because guys miss on quarterbacks all the time. Kansas City didn't take a quarterback in the first round for how long, Kent?
35 years, something like
35
that.
35 years. They didn't even.
Pat Mahomes was the first quarterback they had
Todd
drafted.
Blackledge.
It's Todd Blackledge. It's 34 years. It was 34
won a
years.
game for them. That's crazy to me. Absolutely insane.
And they went to how many Super Bowls in those 34 years?
Zero.
And now they have a guy, and they took a swing. And can you hit a home run without swinging the bat? No, you can't. And they swung and they hit a grand slam, right? And now they're going to be in the Super Bowl conversation for the next 20 years. And that's because that's what that position can do for a franchise. So is it ever a bad idea to take one? I mean, I'll hear the arguments of like, but you already have one, so why not build around him? But he's been hurt. He hasn't been good. So, like, I get it. Now, can Green Bay – I'll also hear the arguments of, like, should Green Bay trade him this year? Should they just give Rodgers an extension and trade Jordan Love? I don't know. Does Chris Ballard want to be does he want to put his Ron Wolf big boy pants on and say, I really like that quarterback last year? Here's a first round pick for that backup. It worked out well for him. Brett Favre, he was decent, right? But actually, I want to kick this question to Kent because I do draft writing with Kent, and he's got different philosophies on the quarterback position as well. And he's one of the smartest quarterback guys I know. So I usually take his advice and pay attention to it. And Kent, before you jump into that, where can we find some of your draft work? Is there something that's been materialized in the last couple of days?
Why, yes, there is, Jacob. Thank you for suggesting it. Me and Jake do a draft guide together every year. It's KC Chiefs specific, but it's 300 plus pages of Chiefs content or of draft content. I'm sorry. And we really like it. If you're interested, you can find it on Jake's Twitter. You can find it on our Twitter. We'd love the support.
I do need to say too, it's Chiefs specific, but like if you're a draft junkie, there's like a couple lines about, hey, how does this player fit in for the Chiefs? The rest of it is like, boom, straight in your face draft profiles and quotes. So it's something you need to get to have in your repertoire. But Kent, tell us your thoughts on the quarterback position, because I talked to you about Jordan Love and what the Packers were doing or what they intended to do. So from an outside perspective, you're not even close to this situation. What are the optics of this for you?
Well, I mean, I tend to agree. I think, Aaron Rodgers definitely showed some signs of waning ability. And I don't think it was arguable. I do agree with that. Taking a swing on a guy that wasn't going to be immediately ready, that has a lot of talent and an extremely high ceiling, that's inarguable. You go and you take a swing on that ceiling with a guy that took it personally and went off and had an MVP season. I don't know if you can argue with that process. I think I am never going to critique someone investing in the quarterback position because it is so critical. It is piece 1, 2, 3, and 4 of a successful football team. Like, it is just head and shoulders, just that important. So if you're going to go out and you're going to take a swing on a guy who had undeniable talent, put him behind a guy named Aaron Rodgers, who took it personally, went out and did all the things he did. I mean, who knows if Jordan Love's ready this year? Who knows if Jordan Love's ready the year after that? But he'll be, what, 24? I mean, he was a young kid coming out. I believe he was 21 when he was drafted. So you're taking a guy that's young, that was two seasons removed from some really impressive tape. His final year at Utah State wasn't exactly, it was pretty up and down, but you saw the talent. Going and grabbing a guy with that kind of ceiling, I think, is the ideal situation for a team, with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who, you would have had to massage some things, I think, with the cap to move on from him anyway, but you've got him set up in the hopper. And if Chris Ballard does go and pay up, pick 21, just think about it as a trade up. I mean, or as a you traded for future gratification because you're up 5. I believe you guys took him at 26 last year, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's a return on investment there, especially if that's what motivated Aaron Rodgers to go out and do what he did.
And here's the thing with 12 is Rodgers can say all he wants because he said all the right things. Oh, I don't need any extra motivation. That doesn't bother me, whatever. There is no way you can tell me from everything we've learned about Aaron Rodgers and this chip on his shoulder and everything that didn't do something to him. He said it on the McAfee show, something along the lines of that night, or it might have been with Kyle Brandt, but poured 4 fingers of scotch and sat down and watched some tape. You cannot tell me that didn't do something to him. And was it the reason that he played as well as he did? No, I think that there are plenty of other tangible reasons that you can see that. But the idea that it was just like, oh, whatever. It just is what it is. That's what one of his famous lines is. It just is what it is. No, Aaron, it's not. It did something to you. They drafted your replacement, the guy that they want to fire you for. If you want to look at it from a sheer, just point blank, this is what it is. It did the same thing to you that it did to Brett Favre 15 years ago. And you can't tell me otherwise. The other thing I'll say to the point you guys were making is for everybody saying, oh, they didn't need a quarterback. Okay. Well, New Orleans didn't need a quarterback for 10 years. How's their quarterback situation right now? It doesn't look great, does it? How's Pittsburgh's quarterback situation look right now? That's not great either. Those are examples of why you draft a quarterback maybe before you. The Chicago Bears have needed a quarterback for 100 years. How's that working out? Kansas City's a great example too. They've needed a quarterback forever and ever, and they took the swing on the 4th best quarterback in that draft class. And Jake, you said this almost word for word on Pulse last year after they drafted Love. If you hit a grand slam on Love, he's Patrick Mahomes. And you mean to tell me if the Packers can go from Aaron Rodgers to Patrick Mahomes, you wouldn't sign up for that? I've said this a million times. If Jordan Love pans out and is the starter for Green Bay for 15 years, not one of you is going to be complaining at all about the fact that they drafted him before they needed to. So that's my thought on that. My beef with him was always I wasn't as high on him as maybe some other guys, but let's move on from Jordan Love because that is a horse that has been beaten and put to bed and cremated and brought back to life and then beaten again. So let's get into this quarterback class. And the first question I have is, who's the best quarterback in this draft class? So this should be 3 seconds. Jake, give me like 2 words or less.
Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. Kent?
It's Trevor Lawrence. I mean, like, moving on. Yeah, just next subject. Here we go. No, he's amazing.
So Trevor Lawrence, best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck?
Yeah.
Since we've been doing it, for sure. You know, I was just looking at our grades today, Kent, just going back the last several years or whatever, and just he's got the highest grade we put in on him.
Yeah. No, I don't. I as far as a prospect with just with the fanfare and the opinion, I think he's since Andrew Luck. That's the only person that can come close to him from a pure prospect perspective.
And I actually think he's better than Luck as a prospect. So, I mean, I think I don't think that's crazy to say because Luck was awesome coming out, obviously. And it's unfortunate that not investing in the offensive line and some of the mistakes the Colts made ended up costing him his career. But Lawrence is awesome. So we can move on from that. That's pretty simple. He is number one. He'll be with Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars. My next question, you guys, is aside from Trevor Lawrence, who's your favorite quarterback in this class? And Ken, I'll kick to you first. So who and why?
My favorite?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think it's Zach Wilson. And he's actually, I think if you're going to look at a guy that has a little bit of Mahomes, that has a little bit of Rodgers to him, I'm not comparing him to those two guys entirely, but the guy that has the most similarities to that kind of player is Zach Wilson. There is a level of creativity with this guy that you match with the ability to throw athletically with a quick twitch release that can, throw from a variety of platforms and create a little bit out of structure, create a little bit within the pocket. You look at some of the things that those guys do, and there's some Rodgers, there's some Mahomes to that guy. He's a lightning bolt. He's a lot of fun to watch. I think he's fun. I mean, I know Jake probably likes him a little bit too.
So I'm writing some notes down as you're talking. All I heard you say was Zach Wilson is if you combined Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, and that's Zach Wilson. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's what I heard.
All the best things of Pat, all the best things of Aaron, Zach Wilson.
Yeah, no. But,
so
that's exactly what I'm saying. So
maybe
so that must say a lot about Trevor Lawrence then, right?
Right. So he's Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Bart Starr, Tom Brady, all those greats just rolled into one, right?
Little hint of Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
He runs like
the hair, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I agree. I really like Zach Wilson from a pure entertainment value is a blast to watch because he's doing stupid things with the ball and he is really fun and he is really he's really creative out of structure. My personal bias is going to be Trey Lance just because he plays for the team I root for in college, but I'm not the fact that he's only played 14 games or whatever is not lost on me. The fact that he's only thrown 400 balls is not lost on me. The fact that he's only 20 years old, not lost on me. He probably should not come out and start right away. I personally think I wish he would have gone back for another year. Now I totally understand why he didn't. Why, you're an FCS player who's won a championship. You're already talked about as a top 10 pick. Why would you go back to school? Totally get it. I really like him, but I like Zach Wilson a lot as well.
That's one. Wow.
I think to be fair though, too, if you want to so dissect these two guys, Trey Lance is the ultimate ball of clay. He is an intangibles guy that is young, it's hard to compare him to anyone else coming out. You look at Zach Wilson, he's going to probably weigh in 6'1", 6'2", 205, 210. He's not a big guy.
That's a concern.
I think people are going to be concerned about that just because he is not a big dude. And Lance is. He's a big dude. He's your prototypical size quarterback that can withstand a beating in the NFL. What's interesting to me is we haven't even mentioned Justin Fields.
Give me just a second, and I'll go ahead and do that.
He's a really good prospect in his own right, Jacob.
Yeah, he is. And I think it's crazy because you mentioned that your bias goes towards Trey Lance. If there's anybody whose bias mine should go against, it's Justin Fields. I hate the Ohio State Buckeyes. If I could pick a stadium to urinate on, the Horseshoe is at the top of that list.
Jacob, I don't know if you know this, but Kent's actually got some Ohio State ties and is kind of big Buckeyes fan.
I am so offended right now. I tell you.
Well,
no, my mom went there, so I got a little bit of loyalty there.
So here's the thing: is I am what they call a Walmart Michigan Wolverine, and what that means is
a Michigan fan, just in general.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't go to the school. I just root for them because when I was a kid, Charles Woodson still is God, but back in the day, he definitely was in those days. But I have nothing bad to say about Ohio State because I have no room to say any. I mean, we talked about it the last time that Kansas City drafted a quarterback or something like that. That was the last time Michigan beat Ohio State or something like that. So it's been a minute since that's happened. But Justin Fields, I watched him and I was like, is he just playing against some Big Ten? Because I call the Ohio State. I call the Big Ten Ohio State and friends because that's really what it is. Ohio State can play their C game and win 11 games, and maybe they lose one stupid game they shouldn't, but they're probably going to win the Big Ten if they do that. And that's exactly what they did this year. They didn't play that well until they got to their game against Clemson. And I watched Fields against Clemson, and the play that sticks out in my mind is the shot he takes from the linebacker.
Yes.
I thought he broke every rib in his body, and he hopped back up and kicked their ass for the next 3 quarters. That says something to me about what kind of guy this is. You want to talk intangibles. You want to talk about balls of clay. I think he plays in a good offense for that. I know everybody's going to say, oh, well, how often have Ohio State quarterbacks panned out? And I will say this is a philosophy on this show. We will not helmet scout, because when Brian Burns was coming out, the question was how many Florida State pass rushers have turned out. And Brian Burns is pretty damn good. So
how about Oregon at quarterback before Justin Herbert?
Whoops.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. That's a fair question. And
Mariota, Harrington. I mean,
if we did a draft on this show of, okay, we're going to draft a team, I would bet you within the first 3 picks, one of us takes Justin Herbert. Like that is, well, maybe not bet you, but that is certainly possible.
You're getting into Herbert territory there. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll go Mahomes, Rodgers, and maybe you don't take Rodgers because of his age, but maybe you don't care. But
I would. I go Mahomes, Watson. Then you're probably thinking like maybe Herbert,
Russell. Right? I mean, they're in that territory. Yeah.
Right. So Justin Fields, to me, I watched that happen and I'm just like, this guy has something, and toughness at the quarterback position, the willingness to hop up. You can see when a very good example of this, I think, is Jared Goff, and somebody who I think Ben Fennell worded it best. I have no idea what his personality is at the quarterback position. What I mean by that is, like, you see Tom Brady, fierce competitor, no game ever feels out of its control. Pat Mahomes is kind of that way too, where it's just like, okay, it's 31-9. And we're just kind of expecting the Chiefs to still win the Super Bowl because they have 15 back there. Obviously didn't happen, but they've won plenty of games that way as well. Fields' ability to, and Clemson, I mean, it's Alabama, a drop, and then Clemson. So to face the second best program in all of college football, take a shot like that, hop back up and just dominate. And honestly, played relatively well in the national title game as well. It's just Alabama is the 33rd NFL team. So that's one of the problems that he was facing on there. So he is my favorite, if you will. But as much
as my QB2 right now, I have him over the guy I think is the favorite, and Trey Lance. So, I mean, I get exactly what you're saying. I mean,
no, he's mine as well. Yeah.
He's endeared himself to me a lot through the process. And if you're talking about a guy, like we look at the Justin Herbert, how the success that he had, I think there are some similarities. There's more similarities to the Justin Herbert Fields kind of comp than people might realize. I think the kind of career trajectory could wind up being relatively similar for those two.
Yeah, and if you watch him, he's not a traditional like Urban Meyer, Ryan Day runner at the quarterback position like JT Barrett or Cardell Jones or
he's good at running.
He's good at running.
He's actually good at it,
but he's actually good at throwing too, which I mean, Cardell kind of was. JT Barrett certainly was not, and JT was short for everybody that's still watching. Just throwing that out there as well. But I think Fields is a really good player, obviously, and I have him as my QB2 ranked as of right now as well. Obviously, a long way left to go here. So my question next is, what round, if any, is Green Bay targeting a quarterback? So Kent, let me throw that to you first.
They shouldn't. I don't think there's any reason that they should be targeting a quarterback in any round whatsoever. And I don't know what Tim Boyle's still around too, right?
He's
not for long. Sorry, Andy.
There's value. I think there's value to having a Tim Boyle behind those two guys too. If you're going to keep 3, I don't know why you would waste a draft pick on a quarterback. I hate saying that, but I mean, you don't want too many guys you're trying to develop or work into that offense anyway. You want to focus a lot of time, effort, and energy on getting Jordan Love to be the best version of himself. If you're going to be working to develop one guy, don't muddy that up. Just, try to see what you can do to help that guy develop before you go grab a quarterback in this draft. Especially this draft for quarterbacks stinks in the late rounds. Day 3 is a dumpster fire. This is one of my least favorite drafts at quarterback to watch, and I hate having to watch all these guys for the draft guide that we're doing, because I don't want to deal with it. They're bad.
Someone asked earlier, I think it was Kellen Mond, how did he look at the Senior Bowl? And he's like the only guy I would even consider, because he has arm talent, but he's not. Is he good? Is he good? Is he good? I don't know.
He's like the Hillary Swank joke on The Office. Is she hot or not? Like that is Kellen Mond.
I think that's a fair question. I think you have, a lot of the class took a little bit of a hit when, what's the kid's name from Cincinnati? Is that Ritter?
Yeah, Desmond Ritter.
When he went back to school, that was a day 2, maybe early day 3 type that I think would have at least been interesting. That was a guy I thought if Chicago couldn't get one, maybe that's the guy they develop behind a Ryan Fitzpatrick bridge quarterback type. But I mean, you start talking about some of these day 3 guys, Labo's in here talking Sam Ellinger and Ian Book. And it's just like, I've never watched Ian Book and been like, man, that is a dude. Like, even when they beat Clemson and all this stuff, it just feels like it's Notre Dame is one of the really good teams at building on both sides of their lines. They usually always have a really good offensive line. There almost feels like there's always a first round offensive line prospect on their team, if not multiple. And then they have these huge wide receivers like Chase Claypool, blocking tight ends, some good running backs and stuff like that. But Ian Book just feels like a dude that's in there to be a bit of a caretaker. So I agree with your assessment. I think if Green Bay, not only that, I just think in a non-COVID climate, which knock on wood, hopefully we're playing in next season, having 3 quarterbacks on your roster is just a waste. Like we just mentioned, Jordan Love never suited up, but they kept that 3rd quarterback, and that made sense because you're one swab away from not having your quarterback. So I understood that. Thankfully this year, no quarterbacks missed time because of COVID, unless I'm forgetting one, but I see no purpose in having a 3rd quarterback on the roster. And if you really want one, get an undrafted free agent, bring him in as a camp arm. And if he does what, like Jake will remember this, Joe Callahan did in the preseason.
I know Joe Callahan.
When Mike McCarthy famously asks, how the hell does he not make the team after the preseason ends? If something like that happens, cool, then you can keep a 3rd quarterback. Otherwise, I think it's really a waste.
I think Ken hit the nail on the head too. When you look at what you want to do with Jordan Love, like we have our developmental guy. Let's pour every resource we have into developing him. That would be the case for bringing back a Tim Boyle. If you want to have 3 quarterbacks, it needs to be a guy like that. Like Kansas City still does that. Their 2 backup quarterbacks could be my dad. Like they're old,
Matt Moore, Chad Henne.
Yeah. And because they're great sounding boards for a young starting quarterback. And don't put that pressure on Aaron. Aaron will do it. You know what I mean? Like Aaron will, but it's just different, for a guy like that. Like give him someone that's been around, that can basically tell you like, hey, I've seen almost everything there is to be seen. I'll teach you how to basically prepare yourself to be a starter. And I know all the reports are, well, Aaron's doing that. Aaron's doing a great job with that because Brett never did that for him. And that's also the coach's job. It is. But to Kent's point, don't steal reps from Jordan Love. He's not going to get a ton anyways. So, like, what's the point in even bringing in a Kellen Mond? They're like, oh, this guy, we love his arm talent. I don't care. So what? We love Jordan Love's too. Yeah. So like give him the reps, and you know what? If he sucks, whatever, then move on. but if you're gonna have a 3rd quarterback, bring in an old wise man.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think that, when we get to the preseason, if there is preseason for next season, I said this year, there's 0 point to Tim Boyle taking a snap, and there's 0 point to someone after, Tim Boyle leaves and you bring in this guy. Start Jordan Love and play him every single snap, maybe until you've got the, 9th string offensive lineman in the game, because you don't want the kid to get ruined kind of thing. But otherwise, start Jordan Love, because Aaron Rodgers clearly doesn't need a preseason. He hasn't played in the last 2 or 3. So there's really no point in that. And he'll be just fine. and you protect Rodgers from injury that way. He gets his reps in practice, and you get Jordan Love some live bullets that hopefully he never has to face in a regular season game.
And you know what's going to be really fun about the preseason next year is Jordan Love. And do you know who it's important to for Jordan Love to look good? The whole franchise. They're going to do everything in their power to go out and showcase Jordan Love.
Yep.
And it's going to be a bunch of dudes like Sternberger and DeGuara, and the Packers go about 9 deep on the offensive line. Like I'm more geeked out and excited for next year's preseason than I ever have been, because there's going to be a whole new draft class in there. Some rookies like DeGuara and Love that basically redshirted this year, on top of the guys like John Runyon Jr., who we already know we like, and then the Jake Hansons and the Stepanics and all those guys that they drafted last year that we didn't even get to see at all this year. So it's going to be fun.
And the 6 receivers that they're sure to draft with their 10 draft picks. So we'll get into that, guys. I think we said that, the draft, I subscribe to the Justice Mosqueda theory that the draft is 5 rounds. And then after that, you're just picking preferred free agents. Unless, of course, you're drafting a punter and a long snapper, which not that anybody would do that in the same draft, but maybe they would. I don't know. But what's the likelihood that the Packers spend a pick in the first 5 rounds on a quarterback? And I assume this is going to be close to 0. So let's keep this 10. Yeah. Jake says 0. Kent says 0. Okay. So we're out of time for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining us on this new journey that we have. And we're calling this thing the Gold Zone for our draft show. We'll be doing this every single week. Next week will be a little bit more draft focused, just because there are certain positions when it comes to quarterback specifically that you just feel like the Packers probably aren't targeting too much. But next week's running back, and Jake and I will have some good insight on that, because it's one of those things that it could be a need. It could be something where they need to take a guy by early. I mean, like the 4th round kind of thing. But
and Jacob, I think that one's going to be a lot of fun, actually, because you think if they roll with AJ Dillon as RB1, then what are the complementary guys that you can put next to him in the backfield? And there are a lot of really fun receiving type running back guys in this draft class. So that's going to be a real fun episode. And
they'll probably be RB2 if you're talking about it. I mean, unless Jamal Williams comes back or Aaron Jones's price drops like an absolute half. I mean, that would be the only way that you could see that coming. But I'm Jacob Westendorf. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jacob Westendorf. Find me over at Game On Wisconsin, which you've seen on the bottom lines here, at Game On WI on just about everything. Like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube. We've got stuff all off season long. This is kind of the kickoff of that. I've got Jake Morley. You could follow him on Twitter at Jacob Morley, and I do have it spelled right, even if he can't. So that's a good start here. This is why we have producers. And then Kent, obviously, pimp your guide one more time and tell us where we can find you.
Find me on Twitter at Kent_Swanson, writing for Arrowhead Pride, gum.co/KC Draft Guide 21. You can get a lot of information about the draft and a full draft guide.
That you can. Until next time, guys, we are the Gold Zone, and we will be here again next week talking running backs. And we've got some fun guests already lined up, and we've got more sure to come. So until then, Jake Morley, Jake Westendorf, Kent Swanson signing off. See you guys next week.